Bharat was careful to keep his movements slow and unthreatening. The king's guard kept their spears pointed at him, maintaining a protective ring around Rama. Over the tips of the spears, Jabali and Bhadra glared at him with deep suspicion. Even Rama was standing with arms folded across his chest, eyes narrowed. Rama, I only wish to say a few words, Bharat said. Bhadra stepped forward with his hand on the hilt of his sword. Lord Rama, I told you it was a mistake to bring them here. We try to impede and obstruct every chance they get. That is their plan. It is part of the conspiracy to keep Ayodhya from realizing its full potential, Jabali barked in his stentorian manner. These two should be given the severest danda under law to set an example. Rama raised a hand, commanding silence from both flanks. We have already ruled upon this matter. Let us not waste time rehashing it. He looked at Bharat directly. You were made to understand your position. It is extremely delicate. My advice to you, he flicked his eye to include Shatrughan, is to hold your silence and do as instructed. Anything else will only worsen matters for both of you. Rama, Bharat said in as placative a tone as he could muster, it would only take a moment of your time. Rama looked at him. Bharat looked back and tried to appeal to Rama personally. But all he saw in Rama's dark eyes was a resoluteness that he knew too well. Once Rama got that look in his eyes, nothing could steer him off the course he had embarked on. Not for nothing did the Kuslavya bards call him Marwada Purushottam Rama, Rama who does as he says. Spare the moment. My time belongs to Ayodhya, Rama said. And Ayodhya cannot. And he turned his back on Bharat, turning to face the eastern sky where daylight had broken and the first tentatively probing rays of the imminent sun were turning the sky above Ayodhya golden. Some of that golden hue fell upon Rama's silhouette as he turned, and somehow, despite the beauty of the illumination, it lent him a dark, terrible aspect. Samrat Rama Chandra, Emperor of Ayodhya, Lord and Master of all Aryavard, the civilized world, Prithviloka, the mortal realm. All this, Bharat realized in a flash of insight even as the king's guard PFs moved forward, jabbing their spears at him and Shatrughan. One point pricked his side, piercing the skin, drawing a trickle of blood. He did not feel it. Nor did he care about the harsh mocking tones of Bhadra and Jabali, who ordered the guards to escort Shatrughan and him from the tower and see that they were secured and that they were not permitted to come into the king's presence again. That last image of Rama staring out at the rising sun, cold-hearted and resolute, stayed with him. It was the rock against which the surging tide of his emotions pounded and broke unrequited. NGCSD. The sun had risen by the time Baiju had a chance to speak with the Prime Minister. He waited as Yuvarajas Bharat and Shatrughan were escorted under armed guard from the tower and taken to the palace. His eyes met Bharat's as he passed by, and Baiju was saddened to see the look on Bharat's face. It was the face of a man facing a death sentence. He knew that was not the case, because the news of how first Queen Dandas transmuted was all over the city, but apparently to Bharat and Mother Kausalya had intervened and had Bharat's and Shatrughan. Even the alternative was no less a punishment. He considered the injustice of it all. Princes of Ayodhya, sons of his fist tightened in anger on the pommel of his short-sword brothers, being treated like criminals. It was beyond tolerance. What he Suryavansha Ikshvaku line, patriots of the Kosala nation, Rama's own failed to understand was why he too had not been arrested. From WHA he had heard, Bharat and Shatrughan's only crime had been to discuss and question the king's new martial policies, which under the new law could be construed as treason. Yet it was he, Baiju, with whom they had discussed and questioned those policies. So then, why was he not being interrogated, arrested, or somehow reprimanded for the same possible answer. The Spasa or Spasas whose reporter had resulted in their being arrested had not been able to provide any concrete details. Because had they provided concrete details, it was inconceivable that Beju would not be arrested by now. Which mean there was only one, that they had been arrested on mere suspicion. No, not mere suspicion. As a preventive measure. Beju knew enough about politics to understand that this was the likely answer. It hardly mattered if Bharat and Shatrughan had been overheard voicing treasonous opinions or merely taking a stroll on the north bank of Saryu. They would have been arrested under any pretext, however flimsy. The whole point was not to actually charge them, merely to prevent them from interfering in any way with Rama's plans. No, not Rama's plans, Jabli's plans. Bhadra's plans. All those warmongering political power factions that stood to profit from Ayodhya going to war. Yes, that made perfect sense. He watched as the man he had been waiting for finally emerged from the lane that led to the Seer's Eye Tower, escorted as always by his retinue of thuggish-looking guards. Beju knew that each one of those so-called bodyguards was responsible for as many murders, assaults, and other dark deeds carried out in the shadows of night than most condemned criminals in the dungeons of Ayodhya. But of course, all their crimes had been committed in the name of national security and in the service of Ayodhya, so they commanded respect rather than dandas. Such was politics. So would it always be. Pradhan Mantri? A word, if you please. Jabli frowned down his long nose. His thugs glared at Beju, waiting for a single word or gesture to crack his skull. The man closest to Beju, a menacing hulk of a fellow with tiny rat eyes, looked almost disappointed when the Prime Minister gestured them aside and deigned to step a foot or two closer to hear what he had to say. Quickly, man, this is the most important day in Ayodhya's history and I have a great deal of work to do, snapped Jabli. Yes, of course, such as barking orders at the men who will actually go forth and fight and die for Ayodhya while you recline on the silken cushions of your royal palki and sip soma. Your eye, my lord, Beju said apologetically, but I thought this merited your immediate attention. He gestured at the wagon standing a few yards away on Suryavansha Avenue. I have succeeded in recovering the king's property. Jabli frowned. What rubbish are you blabbering, Abu? He broke off as the sight of the wagon refreshed his memory. Surely you don't mean. He shoved Beju aside roughly and strode to the wagon. A barked order and his henchman raised the rear covering for him to peer inside, his bright eyes glinting with greedy delight as he eyed the contents. He turned to Beju. You recovered the stolen war wagon. Beju bowed his head in humility. I, my lord. I had my men on the trail ever since the unfortunate incident, and they were able to track I down and return it safely. He gestured towards the wagon. Not one thing is missing. The complete inventory is present. You may have it checked. I certainly will, Jabli said sharply. But what of the miscreants who held up the grama and wounded so many? Where are they? He looked around as if expecting to see the culprits standing nearby, trussed in ropes and chains. Beju had no doubt that if that had indeed been the case, Jabli might well have given the order to have them executed right there and then. No. What he would have done was to parade them and claim credit for their capture, and then have them executed. That was his way. They were dealt with most severely, Beju said. Jabli clicked his tongue impatiently. Yes, of course they were, or how else could you have recovered the property? But where are they now? Or their bodies? Beju shook his head. Lions. Jabli stared at him. Lions? Aye, my lord. During the fight to recover the wagon, they were wounded and retreated deeper into the woods. Unknowingly, they strayed near a den. The pride tore them to shreds. They were in no state to bring here. There was virtually nothing left to bring, in fact. Jabli's eyes gleamed briefly as he contemplated this ultimate penalty meted out by nature in her mystical wisdom. Tore them to shreds, you say? He sighed. Oh well. They were given their danda, that's what counts. The disappointment was palpable in his tone. He would have loved to have meted out those dandas himself, no doubt. But still and all, he had Valmiki's colony to satiate this desire. He glanced again at Beju. Quite impressive, Gramarakshak. Beju, sire, you commissioned me yourself. Demoted me, actually. But let's not get prissy. You damn well know who I am, and who I was. Yes, of course, Beju. Jabli crooked a long finger. The way the skin creased on the bone reminded Beju of the claw of a starved fowl. Well, you seem to have surpassed yourself, Gramarakshak Beju. I shall have to see to it that you are given a suitable reward for your exemplariness to the king. He began to move away even before he finished speaking cleared his Beju throat cautiously. Now came the tricky part. Actually, sire, I desire no reward at all. No pecuniary reward, that is. Rather, I desire an opportunity to serve the king further, if and by your grace, of course. He so wills it. Jabli stopped and looked impatiently at Beju. What did you have in mind, soldier? Be quick, I have much to do. Beju told him.